So 10-7 is going to, again, revisit special products that you all remember. So in this time, we are going to start out with the pattern that you learned so well. And you are going to finish with the factoring of it, because now we're in the factoring stage. So we're going to apply these in the reverse order of the first way you learned them. There are a couple examples here that you should be able to read and make sense out of, but it's so much better when we do them in action. So we're going to do them in action. All right, so the first one, and I'm going to rewrite them because I think they're probably pretty hard to read, especially with the bouncing upstairs right now. All right, I'm going to start out, and I just wrote, that's a really ugly M. I just wrote my m squared minus 4. So, knowing our special products, we are going to say, if my last term is a negative, I know it can only follow one of those special product rules. The only way I ended up with a binomial, 2 terms, and that second term, the B term, was negative, was when I was dealing with this type, and I'll rewrite that for you too, an A squared minus B squared. So I was working with, if I did that one, I could go ahead and I could, well, I'll factor it. Yeah, I'm going to factor it here. A plus B, that's the first time it's done it today. A minus B, it is. It's the electricity that comes from it. Okay, so again, thinking about that logically, how did I end up with only 2 terms here? My OI terms must have canceled each other out. So I have a negative AB and a positive AB. That's why they disappeared. They disappeared here too because I have a binomial, 2 terms. Now, here's the part that you got to wrap your head around. My terms here are a single term. Yes, a single term that is squared. It is, you guys. A single term that is squared. Here I have a single term that is squared, but this term is not squared, right? So I need to change that. You guys just want to be famous like me. I have to change that to, there's that term, but how can I change the term here? This is the term. That would be like the B. How do I change 4 to a term that is a squared term? It would be 2 squared. Now I have an A squared and a B squared. And I established that if I have that, this is the factoring that I have. Not showing invisibly there. So we'll see if this writes. All right. So now I can tell I'm going to have it factored. M is pretty obvious. I know that I'm going to have 2. That's my B. And then if I apply my special products rule, I know that it's or pattern, I know it's a plus 2 and a minus 2. So this, again, I have, I'll rewrite it again. I have only a binomial. Well, at least it did something, but I might have to pause it. The best laid plans. All right, so we have only a binomial there. So what was my first step in this one above it? I want them both to just be squared terms, correct? Correct. So I need to square root. This goes with that other chapter. Square root my 4. My 4 would be 2. So I have my 2p squared. I need to keep that operational sign. What's my 5 squared? Now I can apply my pattern that I knew already, a squared minus b squared. How does that come out when it's factored? So I'm going to put 2p in my first one, 2p in my next one. I want a plus and a minus. That's how that OI term disappeared. And you're going to have your 5 and your 5. Good, 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 good. Can I keep moving or do we need to stop for questions?
Keep moving.
All right.
Keep on trucking.
So, letter C is going to remind you. So what did we say our first plan of attack was? Oh, you can't read that. 50 minus 98x squared. Now, if this bothers you, you can go ahead and put this term first, but then it kind of messes up your patterns. Okay? So I'm going to leave it in this manner. Now, my first thing was, if I want it to fit into the binomial pattern that I know, this first term has to be an a squared and the second term has to be an a squared. Do we have a perfect square for 50?
No.
No. So darn it, I can't apply that. Why would they put that in this lesson if I can't apply it? Let's instead remember the new part we learned with factoring as far as factor out common factors first before you try to figure out the FOIL part of it, the factoring part of it, because it might be an easier pattern to find. So what can we factor out? The common term, they're both even, so let's try that first. So what if I had 2 times 25 minus 49x squared? Do I have some perfect squares now?
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. So I can do 2. We're going to do this without some little extra help. What's my perfect square here going to be? 5. Put that in there. What are my signs going to be? A plus and a minus. What's my perfect square of 49x squared? 7x. Little shorter than trying to find the patterns on the ones you were factoring before. But I didn't know if you'd get that connection without the review and the kind of extra talking through that. I'm going to continue on to example 2. You seem to be behaving, and this is behaving right now. Now I probably will quit. All right, so now we have, what if we start out with perfect squares, but they're trinomials? So my first one is x squared, perfect square, minus 4x, perfect square, plus 4, perfect square. I have 2 different patterns that I know of that get me to a trinomial. It can be that they're going to be a plus b times a plus b, or it can be a minus b times a minus b. This would be a plus b squared, a minus b squared. Okay, so I need to look at what term to decide how I'm going to, which one of those perfect squares I'm going to use. I'm going to look at my oi again, my oi, and if because that's the sum, and if I'm going to look at the sum, because I can have a positive term as my last term or my C term, if you're going to call it that again, your constant term, your C term at the end, ax squared plus bx. If that's going to be a positive, I can get a positive product by multiplying 2 positives. I can get it by multiplying 2 negatives. I can't get the negative sum that way. I have to figure out how I'm going to get a negative sum. A negative sum means I'm going to combine either 2 negatives or a positive and a negative where the negative was going to be the larger value. That doesn't fit into my pattern. The multiplying 2 negatives does. So this is the pattern that this one's going to fit. Right? Are we still okay? All right, so then we look at, let's take our shortcut then, and now you've misbehaved again. If I go too fast. And I think I have to do this with my head, but you won't see at home, so we're going to remind you of this so you get the full effect. So we decided we're going to do the x, the a minus b, and the a minus b. So the x minus and the x minus, right? Yeah. Now we're going to look at the perfect square of our last term, which happens to be the same as that middle term. Now, this part here should be our thinking, but we should be able to jump right to, I'm going to factor this as x minus 2 squared. This is where you should go from this down to using the special products right to that one. Your thinking would have been, I have to take the perfect squares of each one of those. So in the next one, we have, I can hardly read it myself, 16y squared, and I think it's plus 24y plus 9. See any perfect squares up there?
Yeah.
I do. 4 and 3. Okay. What about that 24? Does that matter?
No.
That's my 2AB term, right? So that's a sum. So that one doesn't matter yet. You do have to think about it though. All right. I have all positives. So which one of my shortcuts is that going to be? A plus B times A plus B or A plus B squared. We're going to jump to right away that advanced one here. Okay. So if that is the case, this is my A term. Okay. And then what's my B term? 9. That's going to be my other term. All right, so here we go. I'm going to write it. Can we go all the way to the shortcut? Do it this way?
Yeah.
All right, so what's my first term going to be? I'm going to make it a little wider. 4y. Okay, and then how am I going to get to my positive 9? Plus 3. And we're going to square that. Now, that might bother you a bit with the 24. Does that bother you at all with the 24? It's because of that darn coefficient again. Okay, so my outsides would have been 4y times 3, which is 12y, and then I'd have 2 of those for my 2ab. That would give me my 24y. Okay, that's the reason that one isn't just as slick as when we were doing it. These did not, this one up here did not, we haven't had any with coefficients yet. As soon as we got that coefficient, it was a little harder to see. This one has the same value because it has that 1 as its coefficient for its x squared. This does not have 1, so you can't see, geez, I can't use 3, just plain old 3s to get to a sum of 24. You're not using just plain old 3s. You're using 3s and 4s together, which is 12, and that sum could get to 24. Got your hand around, or your mind wrapped around that one a little bit?
Yep.
And you can always still FOIL it to make sure it's right. You can always still go back to the formula and FOIL it. All right, I'm going to stick with just the last one because it has something to do with that as well. So letter C is, I'll go back to my color here, 3x squared minus 30x plus 75. All right? Do those have perfect squares in them? This one right away should get you. But since it's not a perfect square, could we do something with that to get perfect squares? Okay, divide by 3. If I divide by 3, there's my first term's going to be a perfect square, and my last one is going to be a perfect square. Okay? My middle term, that's okay because it's going to be a sum. So that doesn't have to be a perfect square. That's going to be a 2 times perfect square, perfect square. All right? So now, don't forget this though. Okay? When I did this the first time, I kind of helped you with that. Don't forget that 3 is still going to be in that answer. Okay? But now, we're going to go ahead and we're going to factor this one out. We have one that we have a negative 2ab. That means that this is going to be an A. I'll do it this way since we haven't done this for a little bit. My OI would be a negative AB and a negative AB giving me a negative 2AB. We are going to go right to the shortcut of A minus B squared. Right? So what's my A term going to be? X. What's my B term going to be? 5. What's my operational symbol going to be? Minus to get to that OI. All right, so when I factor this one out, my final answer would be 3 times x minus 5 squared. How are we doing? I think we're going to stick, well, let me say this to you. I just had a conversation with Mackenzie when she came in. We split up the last assignment, the 10.6, into 2 different sections. The factoring part, and then the only thing you added on the next section, the one you handed in yesterday, was then solving. The whole difference between factoring, you see this? This is a factoring exercise. If I go to goal number 2 of this lesson, we get this word, solving. So, Mackenzie, what did I just tell you is the difference? Go ahead.
If it equals 0, you have to solve, and
If it's an equation, we can solve it. If they tell us it's supposed to get to this, we can solve it. If it's an expression, well, forget this part because that's just a factoring. If it's just an expression, which is what we started out with, here, my writing is an expression, we can't solve that one. Okay? The difference is when you get to this set on your worksheet, when it says solve, it's giving you an equal. You're going to do the same thing. You're going to factor. So can we factor this one quickly or not?
Yes.
Okay, let's go ahead and try it.